This episode is sponsored by Bigger City. Thank you so much for supporting us and helping our show to grow.
Hello and welcome to the Big Fat Gay Podcast, where we talk about the things that are weighing on our minds. I'm Dan Oliverio, author, public speaker, and chubby chaser, and today I am your Valentine's Cupid boy. I am dressed in red and ready to Cupid.
He's got his arrows.
I've got arrows. I've got a quiver. I've got a diaper. I am ready.
Tipped in Valentine's venom. Yes. ready to fire.
I need you to pitch up your devil laugh into the elf voice.
Oh, I am definitely editing that up 3 octaves.
Valentine's Day is here.
I'm Trevor Keyson. I'm a super chub, and I'm in the little sidecar of Cupid's cloud bike, and I've got my goggles and my little Cupid grenades that are gonna fill your little cloud of musk and make you feel all sexy.
Ooh. Fancy. My name is Michael Willer. I am a chubby chaser, and I'm your frisky Valentine's boy. This is the first time we've done one of these episodes where it's actually coming out on Valentine's Day.
Imagine that.
So I am super excited, as you can imagine.
Oh boy. Oh, Michael.
The innuendos are coming hard and fast.
Hey there, listener. My name's Don Marshall. I'm a big chubby guy living here in sunny Hollywood, and today I'm here ready to talk about love. Are you ready to talk about love, listener? Because I'm ready to talk about love with you.
And on that note, happy Valentine's Day to our sponsors, our affiliates, our patrons.
Yay.
To you, listener. We love you all very much. You make us able to love.
We're so happy that you can rejoin us for our traditional Valentine's Day episode, where we are taking your letters about sex, relationships, and all things under Cupid's domain for us to talk about.
Yeah. It's an all mailbag review. Well, shall we slide on into this bubble bath of an episode?
I'm so excited to hear people's questions this year.
Yeah, we've got some
champagne.
They're good. They're real
some
good.
chocolate covered strawberries. And I got one of those oversized heart-shaped box of chocolate, and I'm going to pull out our first question.
All right, let's go. I'm reaching around. I've got one. Let's see. From our listener. Hi, guys. I recently went through a really hard breakup, and I was wondering how you guys deal with the sense of loss. Or if maybe you could share some experience. I've been trying to analyze what happened in a positive way, but it's been very difficult. I find myself constantly wanting to reach out and rehash things that have already been discussed, and it's hard to go through the day without thinking about them. Any insight would be helpful. Thank you. Smiley face. Yes, this hits very close to home. I can say that much. As somebody who I've been through two pretty big breakups, and I will say from my own experience, that desire to reach out and rehash, which I'm assuming based on the way this is phrased, that the writer understands that's maybe not the best thing to be doing. I hope, because from my perspective, I think sometimes the breakup just needs time to breathe before you go back and talk about things. Because if you're still in basically the same space and mindset and an emotional state as you were before you broke up, you're not going to have anything new to bring to that conversation except more of what it was that happened when you broke up.
Yeah, it's almost like keeping trauma alive. Yeah.
Right. So just right off the bat, that would be my advice. Again, having done that myself, started with doing that myself in the first breakup and then choosing not to do that in the second one and feeling much better about the second one. I would recommend just, I wouldn't say that it's easy, especially if you're really invested in like keeping a friendship on the other side of that. But yeah, maybe try and just give each of you the space and the time to kind of develop your own lives outside of the relationship.
I'm going to be honest. I got to say, you got to talk with your friends. right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You got, I think, like Michael's being, I think, to clarify something Michael's saying, I think Michael's saying don't talk about it with the person you're breaking up with.
The other person in your relationship.
That's not going to work. You know, you've already talked, in theory, you've already talked about this stuff and it didn't work, right?
Or they don't want to talk about it and that's not going to change.
But here's the thing about talking about it with friends. You need to sort of be aware of your own emotions, right? If you're talking to the same friend twice and you're saying the same things and you're in the same place, you know, a week apart, you're not healing and those conversations are not being helpful and you're going to drive the friend away because you're driving them crazy. You know, you need to kind of keep awareness of your own emotions and make sure that the talking you're doing is healing, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm one of those people, like when I talk about something that's making me angry or I'm not just complaining, I am throwing it out of myself, right? That's how I get past this stuff. If that's not how you heal, then you're actually just going to sort of agitate your other relationships. You need to pay attention to how you're feeling after those conversations and make sure you're having healthy ones.
Yeah. For my part, I think the conversations idea is great. I also think that sometimes that to prevent it from going into this sort of broken record routine, which, you know, hopefully you bore yourself before you start boring your friends with it, because that's optimal. Because sometimes, you know, there is an exercise where you tell your story over and over again to the point where you bore yourself and you're tired of telling it. But sometimes that takes a long time. Your friends tap out sooner. So something else you can do is to focus the conversation is you might turn it into, you know, what will you miss? And then what will you not miss? Sort of like what worked, what didn't work. Because I promise you the relationship broke up for an excellent reason. Yeah. It really, really did. And even if that reason is they're just like, they couldn't accept the love you had, that's fine. Then you don't want to be in that relationship. Usually in a breakup like this, there's a reason and a good reason, a valuable, like profitable reason that this ended. And I've been where you are. Oh my God. I mean, I had a breakup with a guy and he was just like, this isn't working. And by the way, you need to be out in 4 weeks because I think that would be best for both our mental health. Like it hadn't occurred to me to leave, right? Because we were living together. It hadn't occurred to me to leave. Like, but of course, like, duh, if you break up, you should probably leave. I mean, provided you can, you know, I realize there's some economic situations where that's just not viable for, you know, whatever. But in our case it was, and he's like, 4 weeks, you got to find another place to live. And I did. And at the time I was like, oh my God, so harsh. And then the other breath was like, yeah, Dan, that makes perfect sense. And I was forlorn. I was absolutely on the floor. Every time I looked at something, I would start crying because it reminded me. And I just had to go through that. It's like every song and oh my God. And it's when I started to realize maybe I might be codependent.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, and here's the other thing. You know, this was with a hot, thin guy who I thought was my everything. And it was kind of before I realized, you know, who and what I was sexually. And he said something that was really, really important. He said, because I was moaning and crying and weeping like, we don't have a relationship anymore. We don't have a relationship. And he's like, no, Dan. It's not that we don't have a relationship anymore. We just have a different relationship. And I swear to God, that turned the whole thing around for me because, you know, I think in some ways it's easier when someone dies because it's so final. But when someone is just not your lover anymore, they're still in the world. They still interact with you to the extent that they do. They still have an impact. It's much messier, you know? And he said, we just have a different relationship. Now, that was because we could be friends. And the other thing that helped me, and this may not be true in this particular writer's case, the other thing that helped me is like, he was a hot, thin guy, which means the sex for both of us was terrible. I just didn't know the difference. So the fact that we could be friends and give up the sexual component was kind of optimal for me. I just didn't really know it yet. And then you could ask it the other way around. Well, if the sex is actually the best part of your relationship, what does that say about your relationship? Maybe you should, you know, maybe you don't need to be married. Maybe you just need to, you know, fuck a lot. I'm just saying that, you know, there's ways through this of rather than getting trapped in a particular encapsulation of the relationship, which was he was my everything and now it's gone, which is never true, but you can feel like that. You might want to see it with greater dimension, with greater perspicacity.
I think that last part's kind of really important because I think, this listener wrote in about the sense of loss, and, nothing is forever, but that doesn't mean that it's not beautiful and that you can't cherish it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, to not focus on what you lost, but what you had and how you grew and the impact it had on you, and that what you can take from that moving forward.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I like that. And I like focusing on because I think dealing with the sense of loss is the first thing that the listener wrote. Mm-hmm. And I'm kind of like, for me, I'm picking out a couple things that feel very similar to how I approach stuff, like trying to analyze or wanting to rehash things, dealing with the sense of, loss that is hard to get rid of. And I think that, saying don't focus on it is one thing, but for people like me, you can't not focus on it. Like it just runs your brain unless you figure out ways to channel your energy. And I think that the way that I was able to do that in at least 1.5 cases was focus on hobbies, focus on things that you can actually go do at home that will channel your mental energy, that might physically, tire you out. Just literally just exercise yourself so that all of the mental energy, that sort of frenetic analysis and wanting to kind of go do things and like spinning inside your own head, can get out of yourself. Kind of like what Don was saying, like you can talk with your friends. That's one outlet. Figure out like other ways to just get the energy out of you so that you're not just sitting in it and stewing in it all the time.
If maybe start one new thing, because you want to create a life from this point forward rather than this point backwards.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and to dovetail with what Michael's saying, I want to give some separate advice for the friends that are listening. Right, the third time you're listening to the person tell you the same story that they're hyper focusing on, right? They're not healing, right? They're stuck, right? I still think one of the most helpful things a friend can do is play with the rabbit ears and try and improve that reception a little bit.
I was like, what is he talking about? Rabbit ears? Antennas. He's talking about old school antennas, which I feel like half our audience is not good.
Yeah.
I get what
Smacking the TV.
Smack the TV.
Smack the TV.
Because it's stuck on one channel, right? Mm-hmm. And as long as they're stuck on one channel, they can't change the perspective because they literally can't see the other parts, right? You can't see it for them, but you can help steer the conversation a little bit so they're not repeating the same grooved path they've been walking on over and over. And if this is the third or fourth time you've heard it, this is the 50th time they've heard it in their own head. And it's really that hard to get out of that channel sometimes.
And I would say, Don, it's causing damage because it is iron. It's like ironing a crease. It's like ironing a crease into denim. It's just getting harder and deeper.
Yeah.
And that's always a problem after a breakup. A lot of people self-isolate, right? And then that's the perfect time for them to wear that groove that's so hard to get out of,
Yeah. And as the friend listening, I suppose every situation is different, but in general, I would caution against reinforcing what the breakup-y is talking about, as opposed to just like, you can listen, you can be supportive of their emotional state, but I would be cautious about saying like, fuck your ex, like they suck, like
that's not
maybe
helpful.
Adding fuel to the fire in that sense. Like I wouldn't add to that. Like let your friend, express themselves, vent if they have to. But I wouldn't reinforce those mindsets because they shouldn't be permanent. And like, if we start to make them permanent, that's going to just last into the next relationship, and it's never going to get better. Okay, well, we started off with a pretty intense one. Who, Don? Why don't you pick a light and frothy one?
I'm going to look for a nice one here. Here we go. Hi, darlings. Hello, darling.
Hello.
This is a very friendly listener. I like this. Hi, darlings. Looking for tips on sex with a partner who has anorgasmia. which is difficulty achieving an orgasm or climaxing.
I have so much to say here.
This is apparently, and just as an aside, like this is apparently quite a common issue for not just men, but for everyone at some point in their life. So this is a good one to pay attention to, not just for chubs and chasers, for everybody.
Yeah. So the thing about this is the diagnosis is basically the symptom. And that can be it's like diagnosing someone with a stuffy nose. It's like, yes. And what is that? So there can be a lot of reasons that someone is having difficulty achieving orgasm. Is it temporary? Is it permanent? Is it a lifelong thing? Have they ever ejaculated? Have they ever had an orgasm? Is it been like off and on? There's lots to probe here, not in the sense of trying to fix it, but trying to understand it. But where the writer, our listener is really coming from is, this is the situation now. What do I do?
Yeah.
I think where it is it's the same in any disjunct sexual relationship. You need to find the points of overlap, like what's working, what works for both of you. I'm not a big fan of compromise. Like, I did this for you, you should do this for me. I'm not a big fan of that. But just like, where do you overlap? And then the points where you don't overlap, what are the ways to handle that sort of, as I'd say, off the court? Sometimes that can be in erotica. Sometimes that can be in writing, in art. Not that those are necessarily different, but for either partner, and this goes like with people who have different kinks. This goes with someone with a kink and a normie. This can go with someone who is highly interested in sex and someone who's not so interested in sex. You do what you can together and you kind of map those out. And it's kind of fun because guess what? It has to be enjoyable for both of you, right? And then you can look at, well, all right, so this isn't fulfilled in me. And what am I going to do about that? And how can my partner help me do something, just for me? And sometimes that involves non-monogamy. Sometimes it doesn't. But the point is that if somebody begins to feel hemmed in or not satisfied, that has to be addressed.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking was, how, in quotes, how much of a problem is it? Because, the orgasm really is just a single component of a sexual experience.
Yeah.
Not to say that I think it's a fair assumption to say that most people look at it as kind of like the ultimate goal, but not everybody.
Well,
not
especially
by a long stretch.
Especially in normie sex. Normie sex is usually about sucking and fucking, and success equals orgasm.
Right.
Yeah.
And a lot of people, I think there's this kind of ties into this weird like equality balance thing of like, if we don't both climax, then somehow it wasn't successful as a sexual experience, which is not the case.
Or even raise the bar if we don't come at the same time.
At the same time, exactly. Like that's even more.
How hard do you want to make this?
Oh my God, how much pressure is that? Jesus.
Yeah.
You have to start a movie and then try to climax when Thanos snaps.
When he snaps, yeah. No, when Iron Man snaps, that's the...
Yes. I think like my advice would be if, maybe find a way to kind of do a more like smooth jazz, what is pleasurable for your partner that isn't necessarily like a big explosion. Is it a, maybe it's a more finding, their erogenous zones, and just kind of a long, more extended, pleasurable sequence as opposed to the like bing, bang, boom, trumpet blast. Or if there's like something with bondage or S&M or just something that is more of a longer experience, that is pleasurable, maybe without the, explosion.
I'm realizing tacking onto that, just talk, like, because that could be helpful just as far as assessing to what degree there is any dissatisfaction. Like if your partner has difficulty having an orgasm, but otherwise loves what you guys do in bed, there may not be a problem here.
Yeah. Again, this stacks into everything everyone else is saying. I think part of it is during the lovemaking, even if you're having conversations about deprioritizing the orgasm, right? Try not to accidentally emphasize the orgasm as being the end of your lovemaking session,
right?
Because then that's still signaling that that's the goal, right? So if you're having sex and then someone comes, continue the pleasure, right? make it clear that that's not it. That's not the off ramp, right? And that may help remove some of the pressure about, I have to get to the end. I have to get to this finish.
And if orgasm really is the be-all and end-all for you, that's great. Just move it. Move it to the end.
Yeah.
Everything comes to an end. Meals come to an end. Outings come to an end. And sex can come to an end. So just don't make it the goal. Make it the conclusion.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. What about the person's looking for tips, like things to do that aren't orgasm centric?
Personally, there's so many things.
The obvious one that comes right to the front for me is massage, right?
I was going to say that, that's not inherently sexual, but it can be unbelievably erotic depending on how you do it. Yeah.
And for those of you on the other side of the fence, personally, I hate massage. Don't like giving it. Don't like getting it. That is not hot to me. That is an exercise in patience. And, but I realize that I'm in the minority on this, very much so. So that's fine. I'm just saying that if it ain't massage for you, I understand. Other things, touch, you need to,
and to underscore. And if it's not massage for you, make that clear. Like Dan is doing now. Like, don't say, let's do that. And let's try it's not going to be good for you.
Yeah. Or like, it's never worked in the past, but maybe this time will be different. No, it's not going to be different. And then you just get into that hang up, but they think they did it wrong. And you're like, no, it's all right. No one's ever done it right. So, So, but my point was that, the other avenues to pursue, especially if you are in bed with a fat guy, there are so many usually neglected and unexplored parts of the body, parts of the skin that fall off the radar when you're engaged in normie sex. Because again, normie sex is usually the drive for sucking and fucking. And there are so many other places of pleasure, so many other erogenous zones. And if you're wondering, what are they? I'm sorry, that's left for an exercise to the listener.
Yeah.
Go find them.
Yes.
I promise you they're there. I promise
the
you
real
they're
erogenous zone was the friendships we made along the way.
No, I'll be honest, it's very clear to me when I'm with somebody new who isn't trying to find, and you're like, they're not exploring. It sends me a signal as who you are. As a
it's
lover.
like, oh, there's your dick, there's your anus, here we go. No, that's, and I'm not saying that the person writing in is that limited. That's certainly not the case. But there are so many other ways that, think of it this way. Let's say you were in bed with a person who orgasmed perfectly normatively, the way everybody else did. That doesn't mean that sex can't go on for hours, and it's not because you're constantly coming. So there obviously must be something else to do.
Also, I'm just going to jump on the other side of that particular statement and say it does not have to go on for hours to be enjoyable.
No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. I'm just really slow.
Sorry. Don, you saying like the person who is not looking for the erogenous zones made me think of like, what does it look like when they are? And the first thing that popped into my head was Captain Toad. It's like, he's ready to go find all the folds, the nooks, the grannies, the little soft spots that are the most pleasurable.
Is that a Pokemon character?
The Nintendo listeners of this show are dying and laughing. Everyone else is just, I'm sorry, what?
He's Toad from Mario Brothers. There's a game, he had a spin-off game where he was an explorer and he got into all these little places.
And he's got a big old smile and he looks really excited to go exploring. That's what he's doing.
I did want to put one thing in there about exploring and touch. In many cases, it's not the region you're exploring as much as the technique of touching. Everybody knows there's ways they like to be touched and ways they don't like to be touched. There's ways of touching that seem almost impersonal, even though you're both naked, and ways of touching that are like send you to another planet.
Yeah.
And in many times that's not necessarily focused on the particular patch of skin, although sometimes it may be. There are certain parts of the skin that are more sensitive than others. But, there are certain kinds of touch that I like, certain kinds of touch I don't like. That's something else to kind of play with is this is going to sound really technical, but if you've ever studied dance, there's a system of analyzing dance called Le Bon, and named after the person who invented it. But it's a way of categorizing movement as light and heavy, as quick and slow. As it's a way of looking at how to categorize movement, or in this case, how to categorize touch. So it's a way of it's just a tool for exploring. It's not a prescription, obviously.
Yeah. I think a really good, easy to grasp example of that is nipples.
Yes.
which run the gamut of like, there's either
Yeah.
zero sensitivity, doesn't do anything for me, or mildly sensitive, go crazy with it because I need all the more, intensity, or they're hyper sensitive. Please be very, very careful with these. They're not, they're for display only.
This is not a toy.
Yeah.
And a suggestion on nipple work: start gentle and work your way up.
Yeah.
Don't start at the top intensity thinking you can scale it back. It's
I
not
have made that mistake before. I learned very quickly in that case.
No, yeah.
I think probably the first time someone when I was in college and I went out with a guy and he really worked my nipples. I think I have permanent nipple damage.
Oh my God.
Because it was just like my nipples were sore for weeks afterwards.
And I'd like to point out at this juncture that the moaning and screaming that you did in that particular session, for the person doing it, was probably the joy was indistinguishable from the agony. So it behooves you to check in. Like, is this going well? Is this not going well? I can't tell.
I just had like the flash of just like we were in his car at a train station. And there was a point, like we had slushies and he was like using slush to chill my nipples.
Oh my God.
Oh my God.
Oh
boy. That was just
Wait, was that after the fact, like as first aid, or was that part of the eroticism?
As part of it.
Because so it's desensitizing them by numbing them with the ice cold and then trying to break through that desensitization with intensity. Bad idea.
That's something I feel like a lot of chubby guys could have long conversations with women about.
It's true.
If the person is like wriggling or pulling away, even if they don't completely pull away, probably a cue for you to like slow down and reassess what's happening.
Or at least check in, like, is that tickling or is that uncomfortable?
If I slap the top of your head, you've gone too hard.
Sometimes you have to slap it a lot, Don, to find the off switch, Yeah. It's like an alarm clock that won't stop.
If my nipple's in your mouth and I'm, 10 feet away, it's too much.
I'm curious if this is a tactic. I have been with at least 2, maybe 3 chasers that I think were basically like submissives. I think they wanted to be told but couldn't admit it. So what they ended up doing was they would go for my nipples super hard. And when I told them, hey, stop, then all of a sudden they go super, yes, sir.
Oh, wow.
Oh.
And then that was the way they got me to order them the first time. And then they would go just crumble down to that point. It was really interesting.
Don't go to the naughty puppy school of
unscrupulous butt affection. Yeah.
It was interesting. I wasn't sure how I felt about that.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Okay. Well, Dan, how would you like to pick our next one?
Yes, I would. I want to read this one because it's so close to my own experience.
Oh, I think I know what this is.
You know what this one is, Trevor. So our listener writes, in 2013, my guy proposed to me on Valentine's Day. All I got him was Reese's Cups and a card.
Oh, no.
Oh, boy.
And I feel for this person because I'm the guy with the Reese's Cups and a card. And Trevor's like, I rented Greece for us. I don't mean the movie. I mean the country.
Oh, I thought you meant the material. Okay. So I was
No. We're going to Greece. And here we go. So, I mean, I think because Trevor, I am unfortunately married to the best gift giver in the world, and I always lose. And so I'm very familiar with this sort of asymmetrical relationship in terms of gifting and regard.
I feel like it's fairly normal for there to be couples like this where there's like not inequity, but the like different
asymmetricality. That's what I call it.
Asymmetricality of the gift giving or like the way they think about it.
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever hit that point, but I can only imagine the level of like guilt.
Oh, it's awful. It's awful.
With like having like behind your back, you have your like secret surprise Reese's Cups. And the other person's like, I've loved you ever since the day we met. And I want to spend the rest of my life with you. And you're just like, wait, maybe I could go first so that I don't have to follow what you're bringing to the table?
No, I mean, Trevor and I just went through this, I think yesterday, because Trevor said it's Valentine's Day on Wednesday. Are we doing anything? And my first thought was, oh my God, what have you done?
Well, and I will say, I brought that up because I'm like, he is very in his dental stuff and he doesn't realize it's Valentine's Day. And I don't want it to be this thing of like, oh my God, it's Valentine's Day. Oh no. Like,
as if that would matter.
Listener, I think the best gift you can give to your partner on the Valentine's Day where they propose.
Here's my instructions.
To make them look good.
Yeah.
Because I think if you had done some other grand gesture that maybe was bigger than whatever proposal they did, like it's a proposal, but if you had been like, I got us a horse-drawn carriage and I bought out our favorite restaurant and all this stuff, and the person's like, well, I'm going to piggyback on your thing by proposing.
Ooh.
I just want to, I think that a good way to maybe wrap up Dan's particular sentiment, which I definitely identify with, is that, I mean, it's the classic love languages thing, right? Like people express their love in a variety of different ways. And also a person myself who is gift giving is not my love language. Mm-hmm. Like service, like, I can't remember how it's phrased, but like doing things for the other person, absolutely. Gift giving, never been it. And so I have to fight through like a very lifelong sort of traumatic guilt response when I get gifts, which is why I don't give them very often.
Which just makes it worse.
Which just makes it worse, of course. And so I would just say like, okay, yes, they sort of, maybe they one-upped you on Valentine's Day accidentally. But I'm sure, especially if you guys are like, you're getting married, like everything else is good. Like, I'm sure you have other ways of expressing your love that don't necessarily lend themselves easily to a Valentine's Day, gift or interaction, but it's there. And I'm sure your partner realizes it also because they proposed to you.
Yeah.
So I don't know that this listener was necessarily expressing that they feel bad so much as it was just kind of funny. Yeah. But if by the off chance you were feeling bad about that, don't. I'm sure you guys have a great relationship.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. If they want to marry you, they know you're the Reese's Cups and Card kind of guy.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. They know this already. That's awesome. That's totally me. I get that. Trevor, you want to pick one of your own?
This is one of the first ones we got, and I feel like I have a lot to say. I have a lot of theories. I actually wanted to get some data. I wanted to run some tests, drop some chubs in wind tunnels. The question is, why aren't more chubs tops?
Yes.
I meant to reach out to Bigger City to see if they had any statistics about like the percentage of chubs that identify as tops
that
on
would
the
be
website.
Very interesting.
Interesting, yeah.
So my ex, actually the one I just talked about, the one that who broke up with me, his point of view actually, as being a very active normie as far as sex is concerned, his conclusion was, you know what, the reason most chubs, and he didn't say this, but the reason most chubs are not tops is because most men are not tops. If you think about it, haven't you heard over and over again the lament that where are the tops, and not among chubs, but like among the general population. Mm-hmm. This is a common refrain.
I want to take that a step further and say that the people / guys who are identifying as like pure top are perhaps a bit closed off to another part of their sexuality that they're afraid to dive into, and perhaps are not pure tops, or and who knows if they'll ever get there. I don't know why most chubs, if this is even true, if most chubs say versatile or bottom or side or whatever.
I will say like more of the verse guys I've been with have been more enthusiastic and talented, like on both sides of the occasion.
In both sides, okay. Because they probably have experimented a bit more and have tried both sides, and so I will say from my own personal experience, I appreciate having done both because it means that at least from my own point of view, I know what feels good in general terms on both sides, and I can kind of drive in those directions rather than just sort of like, if you've only ever topped, you don't actually know how it feels. Like maybe you can kind of like take guesses, maybe you don't care. But I don't know. I think it's maybe more a matter of branding than it is actually being the case.
Yeah. I've heard from a lot of people that, they think of themselves as verse, but once someone finds out that they are willing to top, that's all they get cast as. That's all that that's all that they're called upon to do. And they actually almost never get to bottom.
Interesting.
I have a weird relationship with this question. Because as a big chubby guy, I find a lot of chasers make the assumption that I'll be a bottom, right? Mm-hmm. And a lot of as a tall brown guy, a lot of chasers demand that I be a top, right? It's a very weird situation where I find like the vast majority of people approach me have already decided what I am before they never ask.
Based on how they perceive you on the masculine scale.
Yeah, exactly. And so this question made me actually think of ready for some sexy time experience?
Yes.
I went out on a date with this guy and I really enjoyed myself. He was very handsome. He was a stand-up comic, so he had like a lot of wit to him. He was smart, really enjoyed it. And I'm not the guy who always invites you back to my place after the first conversation, after the first date, but I did. We went back to my place. We hadn't talked about sex very much yet. But I this is not on him. I was escorting him to my bedroom. So there were certain assumptions he had and he was right. But then he literally like just dropped his pants and jumped onto my mattress, butt up in the air and waited. And I'm like,
that's abrupt. That's abrupt.
And I'm like, okay, all right. But that adds a weird pressure to the situation for me that I don't find sexy or fun. To the extent,
Don, I'm definitely to the extent that given that you said he was a stand-up comedian, I wonder if he thought that was funny.
Clearly that was not
I don't think that's
because it sounds kind of comical.
It kind of does, but it wasn't in the moment.
Got it.
Yeah.
Got it.
I don't know. I feel like it's one of those moments of like, if somebody's that bold about like, this is what's happening next, probably what they're hoping for is like, take it.
Yeah.
Like he wanted you to just own that whole situation. Just, I think that was
I own that hole.
Yeah, really, go for it. Which, but given that this is a first date situation, is maybe, I don't know, should have come up in conversation to some degree first. Like that's a pretty big leap, I would say. Most people don't do that.
I mean, like, kiss me before you offer me your sphincter. Like so.
Like usually
one end or the other. Come on.
That was the demo track for Sixpence None the Richer. Kiss me. No, am I before you? Someone's laughing at that in their car. I also would like to point out, so my first thought is like, a lot of the time there's also just the like equipment physical issue of like a super. I mean, I do know super chubs who are tops, but like there's some mechanics and physics and
there are mechanical issues to chubby guys topping, and that's sometimes their own body, that's sometimes the chaser's body.
The fat pad.
Although I rarely hear, and maybe this is just, because, who one is a filter for what one experiences. But I rarely hear super chubs complaining, like seriously complaining that they can't top. I use either they do top or they're not disappointed. It's in my experience, but I could have a very limited pool.
Well, I think there's also then like the, I don't know, whole like if you want to get into the psychology of human experience and sexuality and the whole, the way people are treated and how that impacts sexuality and sexual desire.
That's true.
I mean, there's so many factors, but my first answer would be just like, I mean, I guess depending on this person's like what kind of the scale of chub that they desire. It's like there's a point where it doesn't work.
And yet I have seen some huge guys top admirably.
Yes. I know of I don't know if this is directly related to the fact that they were a top, but a chub /super chub kind of threshold who had I don't know how to pronounce it exactly. The penonectomy.
Oh.
Basically
having the size
get into a little body horror for Valentine's Day. Basically kind of like their fat pad removed.
Or substantially reduced.
Yeah, or reduced. I think, I don't know if it was, I assume it was to just make that easier and make life easier, because it's, a fat pad's there's a lot to get into. We could have a whole fat pad episode.
It's a blessing and a curse.
Yes.
I was just saying that an easy solution to this, that's not quite as radical as surgery, is a position that a lot of people enjoy, is having the super chub lie flat and having the chaser lower themselves onto him, because then the belly tends to be retracted, the fat pad tends to be retracted. It's an easier position. I mean, this is all about
Cowboy
repositioning.
style.
Yeah,
that tends to be my position of default.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
it's the easiest one.
I have just to go back to the actual question, why aren't more chubs tops? I wonder if part of it is, Trevor kind of mentioned like the psychological issues, but to be a top is to, in a lot of ways, to take control, like to be the driver, to be in the driver's seat, and you have to have a certain degree of confidence to do that. You have to have a certain degree of decisiveness to do that, and you have to know how to drive, for Christ's sake. And you have to know how to drive, and you have to know, you have to be out of your head enough to be able to enjoy it and what's happening next. And I think there's a lot of, pressure on doing that, especially if you're not with a partner that you know very, very well. Maybe it's a new hookup or a date. And I suspect that, it's in some ways it is just easier to say I'm a bottom, because then you kind of don't have to drive. You can kind of show up, say it's okay to do this, and then let the top take control. And I think there's maybe, in some ways, it's the path of least resistance.
And maybe to wrap this up, I'm going to put out one last hypothetical here. And this is purely a hypothetical. I'm not sure about this, but I'm curious. In my life, I may not share the dominance in my life of, say, a business executive who are legendarily bottoms in sex because they have to be so dom in their day-to-day life, right? But I am aware, as a fat person, I have to put up so much time and energy managing my relationships in my professional life, in my outside professional life, that is affected by my fatness, that I'm putting so much energy into managing all of those interactions, that when I finally have the chance to relax and have a sexual relaxing in relationship, I may not want to have to be in the driver's seat there too. You know what that reminds me of, Don? It reminds me of the introvert who knows how to extrovert. Yeah, it's very much the case. I feel as a fat person, I have to expend more energy in a standard day-to-day interaction with strangers or, workmates than a thin person does. I really do.
Interesting.
Top chubs, let us know if you are wondering where all the bottom chasers are. And we can arrange a little like camp mixer where all the top chubs are on one side of the gym and all the bottom chasers are on the other side, and then they
and we play West Side Story.
I was gonna say the West. That's funny. Well, here we are at the end of part 1 of our sexy, sultry Valentine's Day episode. You're gonna have to watch out for part 2.
Oh yeah.